those guys in the backfield, Jaylen Warren, Najee Harris, sparked a lot of debate when you talked within the fan base. It's funny because it's literally the Steelers themselves as an organization are not having this conversation. It's just the fan base that is, and people wanting to write off Najee Harris, say Jaylen Warren should be the number one running back. And it was a conversation that was happening before this 60+ yard touchdown run on Saturday. That isn't what like started this conversation, but I think that it fueled it. It sparked it. That play happens, and all of a sudden it's a conversation again. That, along with the fact that Najee's really not touching the ball in the preseason, they're very clearly preserving him for the regular season. But I wanted to get your take on this because for me, the way I look at it is, one, I look at having two running backs basically the same as having 3 or 4 receivers now. Like, you need to have them. I almost view Jaylen Warren as a starter within this offense because of that. Like, you need at least those 2 running backs. And they're just so different from each other. Until I see Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris both as running backs run within the same environment. And what I mean by that is down and distance the same, seeing the same amount of players in the box, like same situations. That's the better word probably than environment.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to compare the two, I'm just going to be thankful that we have both, because I think that you need both to have a successful Pittsburgh Steelers offense. They're both on the team right now. This could be a conversation down the line where, again, like, we maybe prematurely started the conversation on here about would we pay Najee Harris? Maybe then you start having a conversation like, probably not if you got a guy like Jaylen Warren for that much cheaper. But for right now, the time being, I don't think it's a conversation worth having because they're both going to get the ball a lot, I think.
Well, and that's the thing. Would we pay Najee Harris? That conversation that we had Jaylen Warren wasn't even in our minds. That was just strictly talking about Najee. But when you compare the two, I feel like it's hard because I see what Steeler fans see in the flashy plays that Jaylen Warren has had, and I completely understand why they have the mindset. I completely understand why you're like, well, we haven't seen Najee do this. Well, I'm like, what I think is, if you went back and watched Najee at Alabama, you didn't see him do it there either. Like what we saw from Jaylen Warren on Saturday with that 63-yard touchdown.
You weren't expecting him to be a home run hitter.
He's not that type of running back. He's the type of running back that is going to be a bell cow that will carry the load for 20 plus carries a game and be able to grind down a defense. That's what Najee is, as opposed to Jaylen Warren, which is more of a traditional, like, he can take the speed to the defense and really open up a run. I think it's valuable to have both, and I think it's good that you have 2 different running backs. We don't have 2 running backs that are completely the same, and honestly, we probably have 3 running backs whenever everything is all said and done that are all completely different from each other. Because even though Jaylen Warren has the speed, he's not Anthony McFarland. Anthony McFarland is not the other 2. Najee's neither of the other ones. So I think that while there is debate on, at least among the fans, like, should Jaylen Warren be the starting running back, I think I would call him a starting running back, but I think this situationally, the Steelers have 2 guys where they feel comfortable playing either one with their ones on the field. And I think that there's not really that much of a step down between the 2, at least as I see it right now. And they're just different. I feel like it's hard to really compare them in my eyes and say one should be ahead of the other because they are different. I do think Najee's still the number 1 running back. And I think that as soon as the season starts, that's going to be clearly the case. But I think that Jaylen Warren still has his value there. So if we're having this conversation a couple years from now when it comes to paying Najee, then yeah, I mean, you're probably going to get me saying like, yeah, I'd rather have Jaylen Warren and not give a contract. But that's a completely different conversation. That's not saying this season I want him better or I want him over him. So I don't know.
And I think then you're going to be having a conversation about bringing in another running back to go with Jaylen. Like, it's not just handing Jaylen because let's be honest. Like, okay, so you look at Jaylen's college career, right? 2 years at Utah State, 1 year at Oklahoma State. The last year at Oklahoma State, he did have 281 touches, 256 carries, 25 receptions. But you look at like that workload compared to, so in totality, 3 years, 452 touches. Najee had 4 years in college, although kind of sparingly that first season. He was part of a committee. 718 touches in college at Alabama. And I just think his body is more built to take that type of contact, that many touches. Jaylen Warren, I don't know that he's built to take on that many touches in the NFL. So I think even if we do have that conversation down the line and it's like, okay, yeah, we're letting Najee go, but Jaylen Warren isn't just going to be a standalone back here. Like, it's going to be the same conversation we're having now with wanting two guys.
I mean, let's be honest. Jaylen Warren is essentially if you lost like 30 pounds and went out in the backfield. That would be what Jaylen Warren is. So
I think he's got some like Austin Eckler vibes to him.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I can get on board with that.
And he's not a very good runner, though. I think Jaylen Warren might actually be a better runner than Eckler is. But
probably. But Jaylen Warren and Najee are just so different. It's hard for me to have this conversation because I don't really view Jaylen Warren as the same running back as Najee, and I don't think that many people should. And also, you want to talk about Jaylen Warren in college? Mm-hmm. He played BYU in college. I had no idea who he was.
Yeah, I mean, it was really that last year at Oklahoma State that he kind of but he transferred probably because he wasn't really featured within that Utah State offense, I would assume, to Oklahoma State. Because it wasn't like he was a grad transfer or anything. Like, he just got out of there.
Yeah. He played BYU once, and he had 2 carries for 2 yards. So.
Catch happens. 2-run homer.
Catch it a homer. Yeah. Breaking the fourth wall. There it is.
We'll talk about that in 2 days from now. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, that's kind of where I'm at with it. I think they need both in order to be a successful offense. I think there's a lot of times this year where we should see both on the field together.